You are listening to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss our RC adventures.
Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss the ups and downs of the new RC Flyer. Join your hosts, Michael and Jay, as they take flight at the park. Now on with the
everybody,
show.
Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast. I'm Michael from Arizona, and with me always is my good friend,
Jay from the hills of Texas.
And we're missing AK Mike today. He's got some prior engagements. I think he's doing some
theater
community work, community theater. So anyway, good for him. But we're joining you. Thanks for joining us on the Park Flyer Podcast. Before we get started, we'd like to thank everybody and make sure you like and subscribe on our YouTube channel. And as always, check us out on iHeartRadio or whatever podcast you listen to. Today we are kind of discussing some important things. I know we come back to it on occasion, but at my club we're going through the re-up process. So everybody's putting their membership back and renewing their memberships for the new year coming in, because it's October and November, December it's due. So they kind of start the everything right here and give everybody a couple months to kind of get it done. But anyway, we have meetings every month, and the meetings we have a newsletter, and it's called the Slow Roll. It's kind of funny. But it's usually got photos, and it's got what people are doing in the club and articles and that kind of thing. Well, one of our guys is safety, right? He's a safety guy, and kind of reminds me of you. And yeah. He wrote an article this month, and I was very impressed with the way he wrote it and what he mentioned. So I thought today we'd talk a little bit about safety. This is our yearly or quarterly safety episode. And then anyway, he was talking about everything that you need to do to go to the field. And so I thought it was very interesting. I will say that he is retired. He's a little older guy, and he's super funny. We all love him to death. His son flies out there as well. And he is very observant, and he's a ex-firefighter. He retired from the fire service. And so that's kind of why he got the job as a safety guy, because we do have incidences where, people may have a mishap with their airplane, cause a crash. And I think if you remember a couple of years ago, we had a fairly sizable fire.
The little fires
involved.
All over the place, yes.
Yeah, it wasn't little. It was one big one over 1,000 acres, but we were able to get kind of through that. And so he writes articles occasionally on how to kind of, stay safe and not burn the whole place down and try to keep our club in good working order. So anyway, I thought I'd touch a little bit about it. And, you're kind of a safety guy, so maybe you can kind of throw your 2 cents in there. But his article started out with, basically that this is kind of, coming into the end of the year. And as we renew our membership, we need to have safety in mind. And some of the things that he does is, and you and I have had, everybody, I think, but you and I especially have had this happen. He was talking about pre-flighting, right? And so we've talked a little bit about pre-flighting our airplanes and doing all this other stuff, but he took it one step further, which I really appreciated. And he said, honestly, before you even leave the house, there should be a pre-flight. So he said you should pre-flight your day, right, that you're going to the field. So in his particular instance, the way he was describing it is that you pre-flight your trailer, if you have a trailer, your truck. One of the things that he mentioned in this is that you should make sure you have all your batteries, make sure you have all your planes that you're going to fly, make sure you have your radio. Right?
There you go.
There's been times where both you and I drove all the way out to the field, and then where's the radio? Oh, I thought you got it. No,
yeah, I thought you grabbed that box off the counter. Oh, I thought you grabbed it.
That had the batteries and the radio.
Yeah, that's it.
It had the battery and the radios in it. And so I'm guilty of it. You're guilty of it. I know, yep. Even flying with Barry, that Barry's driven all the way out from his house to flies turbines, and the radio was sitting right there being charged. And so he does talk about it. And I think one of the things that I like when I see Barry is that Barry brings his entire entourage of parts, tools, everything he needs in case something goes wrong, because he's going to make a day of it. And therefore, when he gets there, he's got his glues, his tools, whatever cords or battery adapters, any of that stuff, battery chargers, generator, gas, all of the stuff that you would need to make a day of flying.
Right.
Unless, if you're just going to go for a few minutes and just maybe fly one airplane, at least I've got that airplane, I've got the right battery for that airplane, and I've got my radio, and, I've got everything that I would need. If it requires gas, I got the right gas. I didn't bring my diesel as opposed to bringing my, two-stroke or whatever. And if I've got that airplane, the little Yak 55 that requires a 2-cell battery, I don't show up with a whole stack full of 6-cell batteries thinking, oh, I'm going to fly. So for me, because I kind of keep everything in the same spot, and now that I'm in the shop, I have everything in its kind of little place. But I thought that was a really good way to start your day, is doing a pre-flight. Technically, you're getting ready, but I like the fact that he said it was kind of a pre-flight, right? So it's a pre-start to your day, where if I'm loading the truck, I'm going to load all the things that I'm going to need and then make myself a little checklist that says, this is what you're going to need to go out to the field. So I thought that was fantastic that he said that you pre-flight from the house. So from the house, go through everything. Now you spend the time, swing in, grab yourself a coffee, get to the field. Now you're at the field. And he mentioned that there's a pre-flight at the field, which to me was kind of confusing, because I'm like, oh, well, I'm at the field. Why would I pre-flight in the field? But I think it's a weekly occurrence that we find that when we get to the field, something's not right. Right. So in our particular case, we have some solar chargers. Maybe they're not working, or, maybe I come in and, the normal table that I usually sit at is not available. So I have to get to some other table, and it kind of throws me out. But, I'm parked where I need to park. I get all my airplanes out that I'm going to fly, and I get all my equipment that I'm going to go fly, and I make sure that it's all together. Right. And I am guilty of this, but when I get to the field, I'm a social animal. I'll bring something out of the truck. Like, I'll get out of the truck, I'll walk over with my radio and my battery charger, and I'll set it on the table, and then I'm out talking to people. And I know you have the same problem, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're like, hey, what's going on? I haven't seen him in a
that's
couple
a
days.
cool looking plane.
Shaking hands. What's going on?
Yeah.
Right. Squirrel.
Squirrel.
You're kind of off in another direction. And so you're kind of doing the social thing. You're talking to everybody, and then you come back, and maybe there was something that you needed to get,
or plug in,
and you didn't, or plug in, right? And I've been guilty of that too, where I should have started charging batteries. I had a couple of low batteries, and I thought, oh, I'll just charge them at the field, and I didn't plug them in. And then the first thing I do is, oh, I want to go fly, plug in a bad battery.
Right.
So we've seen that happen before.
You're putting the wings on or something, and then you squirrel, you start talking to your buddy, you come back, and then you put the rest of the plane together, but you never plugged the wings in. You never put the servo leads together. You know what I mean? And then you get out there and you're just like, okay, let's go fly. This plane flies great. And you didn't do your pre-check. It's always something else. It's never the biggest thing with all this stuff with safety, right? It's never one major catastrophe. It's always a series of little things that make the big things happen of when you get lax.
And that's good, because that brings us to our third, right. That brings us to the third point, is the actual pre-flight of the airplane. And, you and I are guilty. You probably can't see it if you're on a YouTube channel. They're right up above my head right here. There's a F-15, and that F-15 is pristine. It's brand new. It has flown twice and crashed once. And Jay and I crashed it at the park because we plugged everything in, and the ailerons were actually backwards. And we tossed it in the air, and the thing, hit the ground. Now, luckily, we figured something was wrong, and, we kind of fixed it. Then we went and flew, and I think the ESC is what burned up in that one. So unfortunately, it's all glued together, and to get to the ESC, I'd have to pop it all apart, and I just haven't really had a chance to do that yet. So I'm not, in the process of pulling the airplane apart just yet, but I'll eventually I'll get to it at some point, because it's a fun little flyer for the park. So yes, we are going back to pre-flighting the airplane, and pre-flighting the airplane is very important. Linkages, prop savers, motors, ESCs, battery connectors, Like you're talking about, some airplanes, when you plug the wing in, you've got to make sure that you got the right wing set in and not opposite. On my A10, there's, a plug for the left and the right, and it plugs in everything, right? So you just plug that in. And normally I leave them out, hanging out of the wing, so I know which one. But occasionally I've been to the fields where they both kind of went into the center part, and I reached in with the clamps and pulled one out, only to realize I pulled out the right side for the left and the left side for the right. So when I went to go, I was like, whoa, what's wrong with this thing? And then I realized, oh, crap, I've got the wrong one plugged in. So I had to stuff it back in and pull it out the other side. Because you really can't see that on my A10. You can't see inside. They kind of turn the corner. And they just kind of crossed when they got sucked inside the body. Landing gear, wheels. I've seen that happen where guys will get up and they'll start flying, and then poof, the wheel falls off because the collar wasn't tight. Right. I've seen canopies fly off. I've had props fly off because the nut wasn't tight on there, and I've had servos that don't work because something got jostled around. And I think I've told this story before. When I was in college, I knew a guy. Jay and I, went to college together. If you didn't know that, but I knew a guy that I had worked for. I did some side work for him, and he had a Taylorcraft, hand-built, scratch-built Taylorcraft that he and his father had literally whittled the wood,
grew the tree,
whittled the wood, built the whole thing, covered it. It was the most beautiful Taylorcraft, custom-built Taylorcraft. It was a third scale, so it was really big.
Real big, yeah.
And I would always bust his chops, come on, let's see that fly. I want to see a fly. And he would always be like, my dad passed, and that's the only thing I have left of him, blah, blah, blah. Well, make a long story short, one day, I kind of was riding him, and he's like, you know what, you're right. We need to go out and fly that as a tribute to my father. Let's just go. And so that Saturday, I was all excited. I jumped in the truck with him. We went out to the field, and this was in Ruston while we were in college. And everybody was out there flying their big third scales, and they were on a paved runway. And, I mean, they were oohing and ahhing over this thing because it was such – it could have, if RCs could win Oshkosh, which is the big airplane thing, this one would have won because it was just such a beautiful custom job, and it was so, detailed. And for that time, I mean, we're talking almost 30 years ago, hard to believe, but, for that time, that was pretty impressive to be able to hand build something like that. Well, he took the thing off, got it all cranked up. It was a gas motor, and he put the pilot and everything back in. And when he took off, he added full throttle. The airplane went straight up in the air and just started climbing, ran out of energy, and came down and just right back into the ground. Shattered that airplane. Balsa parts went everywhere. And I was sick to my stomach. Because I had been ragging on this guy for, months to go fly this thing. And, of course, it was real quiet. And it's one of those, scenes where everybody's standing around him, and when it happens, everybody goes, poof. And now he's by himself because nobody wants to be around the guy that just crashes, And he went out and, scraped everything up, took a broom and swept up the thing. But come to find out, it was when he stuffed the pilot back into the cockpit, it disconnected the receiver battery. Man. I mean, it disconnected it. So when he went full throttle, it actually loosened it. I shouldn't say it disconnected it. It loosened it enough that when he went full throttle and the motor started pulling, it actually pulled it out. So he had no control from the minute he went full throttle. There was nothing. His radio was dead, and because the receiver wasn't receiving anything. And I think in today's world, there's some, there's some sort of features, in the new radios where if that happens, nothing, you can get it to go to a low setting or whatever if you lose radio contact. But in the old days of the 72 megahertz, it was all or nothing.
With the tubes.
Anyway, it was devastating to us and watching him. It was just like, oh, but so anyway, pre-flighting the airplane is very, very important. Make sure you check everything on the plane that you need to check. And it also makes for a good time, right? I mean, you don't want to go out there. When I went, a couple times ago, then I threw my airplane, crashed it first time. That was the only airplane I had, so my whole day was shot, right? And you don't want to be that guy. So make sure that you pre-flight everything, get it, where it's all working. And then the best part of his article was this next one. And he basically, on number 4, he said, pre-flight your mental preparedness, which I thought was fabulous. I'm one of those guys that I'm constantly flying. I mean, that's what I do for a living. So my mind, as far as flying goes, is always in that flying mode. Matter of fact, my wife hates it because if I'm driving and I see an airplane, I'll look up. She'll be like, watch the road, not the plane, that kind of thing. But one of the things that I know in the real world, and as an instructor, both for the AMA and for real aircraft, that's one of the things that's my big pet peeve, is that people that show up and they're not mentally prepared for what's about to happen. Now, I will tell you that I'm heavily weighted on the aircraft, the real aircraft side, the full scale stuff, because that'll kill you, right?
Right.
And I've actually sent a student home at one point. I had a student and he showed up not prepared mentally. He was in a hurry and he's like, come on, I got stuff I got to do.
Was
Let's
that the
get
guy
this over
who
with.
wore the flip flops and all that kind of stuff too?
No, that was a different guy.
Oh, okay.
Different guy. That was a totally different guy. No, this guy, he had a big project at work and he had taken time off of this project to kind of go do it.
Oh, so he's trying to get his cert. He's rushing through it, and he's still back working his other job, as opposed to his mind being right there.
In his mind. And we call a lot of the accidents that happen in the real world on the real aircraft side or full-scale side, we call them owner-operators. And it's because they're busy thinking about their business or whatever it is they're doing. They're not thinking about the focus on the flying. And the flying is a skill that you have to, do 100% of the time. And when I go to work and I sit down in the cockpit, everything else from my brain is turned off. My phone gets turned off. All the stuff from the world gets turned off. I'm just solely focused on, pushing back from the gate and getting my passengers where they need to go. Well, on the RC world, I'm already a pilot. So when I show up, this is a relaxing time. I really never go through this mental checklist. And I thought this was a good kind of wake up call for me, because in the last couple of podcasts we talked about, there was that, crash of the Infinity Wing. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to attribute that largely to the fact that as I was walking up there and I thought somebody was going to come help throw it, that I was like, screw it. And I threw it in and it crashed. So for me, had I gone through a mental checklist, am I mentally prepared to throw this airplane out here? I probably would have said, you know what? I would prefer to have someone else do this.
Do it.
And if I would have had that in my head going, okay, am I mentally prepared to fly this and throw it myself? Obviously I wasn't, right? I wasn't, right. It was not time. It wasn't the right time for me to attempt to do both. The other thing is that I threw it with my right hand, which I never do. I always throw with my left hand so that my right hand controls the elevator and the ailerons. So in this particular instance, I just walked up to the line like I was just, Joe Schmo, and just said, hey, here we go. And, Johnny on the spot, and it came back to bite me. So for me, I really, really liked this part where he pointed out that you've got to be mentally ready to go fly these airplanes. That we don't really, we think about it as a hobby. We think about it as, one of those instances where this gets us, the relaxation or whatever. But in reality, you and I both have been around where people have gotten hurt. They've gone to the hospital. Mm-hmm. We don't know personally. I don't know personally, but I do know of instances where people have lost their lives in accidents related to RC. I know where, the airplane has gone down because of some, mishap. The guy wasn't really mentally ready to do it. And, we burned up 1,000 acres over it and almost lost the club over it. So this is vitally important to our listeners and to people that they don't take it lightly. And I, for one, probably am going to try in this new year to make this more part of my repertoire, that when I get to the field, that I turn everything else off, right? I do my social thing, but when I go up to the line to fly, that I'm pre-flighting my mental ability to, basically make this happen. And, for me, flying turbines, you have to get mentally ready, because this airplane is going to be 200 miles an hour going through the air. And, if you look away or if you do something, tiny corrections or, large corrections will cause, large reactions, which usually cause detrimental damage, small reactions. So you kind of have to get in the line. And I'm very guilty. I fly a lot of different airplanes, from a small foamy up to a turbine jet. And, from a little, that 787 that's sitting back there is literally, you can fly in my garage. It's just a little tiny airplane, maybe 12 inches wide, all the way up to my, big turbine, which is over 12 feet long. So it is for me a wake up call, and I do want to point that out and kind of give it to our listeners, for those of you that are listening, that it's important to kind of be in that mental picture. And it reminds me, because Kenny Rhodes is the guy's name. I'm going to give him some props. And Kenny showed up at the field one time, and he had a bunch of airplanes. And we were like, oh, man, you should go fly this. You should go fly that. You go fly that. He said, I'm not feeling it today. I'm just not feeling it. And we're all like, come on, we're all prodding him. And he's like, yeah, no, I just feel like my head's not in the game. And I gained a lot more respect from him. And obviously he's older than I am, and he's kind of been around a long time. But I've seen him fly great, and I've seen him wreck some planes, right? So I know that there's both ends of the spectrum. And sometimes your mind's not in it. Sometimes going to the field just means you're going to hang out with the guys. And I've done that before, right? Where I showed up and I had airplanes. Right. You've done that, where you had airplanes, you show up, other people are looking for help or whatever, and you spend your time dealing with them, and you really never fly. But maybe that's good because your mind wasn't ready for it, or maybe you weren't in, the right frame of mind. But to be a bigger man and say, yeah, I'm just not feeling it, or today's just not my day, that's kudos to him for being able to say that. And he went home with all his airplanes intact. He didn't try to push it, go out there and wreck a very expensive airplane, or start a fire, or, do whatever. And sometimes I think we find ourselves running out to the field because we're like, oh man, I got to go today, and I got stuff I got to do, but I can get it in a quick flight. And realistically, that's probably the wrong attitude to have, and inevitably winds up something's going wrong. And then the last thing he said in his article was repeat as necessary, which I thought was kind of cute. But it is true, right? So once we do this pre-flight at home, pre-flight at the field, pre-flight the airplane, pre-flight our mental status, now we've done it, right? Now we come back, we're feeling comfortable, yet we pull out a new plane and we just walk right up to the line. You and I are guilty of
Squirrel.
it. Pull out a new plane. Oh, here you go. What's wrong with this airplane?
Yep.
Oh, crap. The linkage on the elevator's not attached. Well, how did that go?
I thought you attached it. Oh, man.
Right.
We were talking about it.
I know, right? We're all guilty of it. And anyway, it was a really good article for me to read. I really enjoy reading, our slow roll. It kind of, it's not a huge publication, but it comes out, monthly with our meetings, and it does occasionally have some really good articles. And I thought Kenny did a really, really, really good job talking about safety and how we can mentally prepare. Doing our pre-flights is of utmost importance to keep both the club safe, for us safe, and our aircraft safe. And I applaud him for that. I thought it was really well done, and I personally learned a lot from it as well. So. And, the other thing, too, is it's difficult for A-type personalities like us, especially being in the hobby for so long, to accept, I wouldn't say criticism, but just accept direction, that this was a good what is the word I'm looking for? It's just a kind of a self-assessment of what I do.
Right.
And by reading his article, just sitting here looking at it on my email, I was kind of like, I do a lot of that stuff. And I know that over the last couple of months, I've run into a couple of guys that, we've talked about the podcast, and they're like, you run a podcast? Oh my gosh, what is it? And they're listening or whatever. They may be new listeners, they may not. But I gave them the information. And so, it's good to have the new guys coming in. I do see that our membership for both the, web and the downloads on our podcast do go up monthly. I mean, we are gaining audience. We're gaining, popularity. And so I just want to kind of touch over that again, that I felt like this was a good opportunity to do it as we're coming into a better season, right? For us, the weather's getting better. So
right. Same here in Texas.
Right. And so, now is going to be the time where we can get out at all times during the day and not just 5:30 in the morning when, for us, it's 120 degrees by 10 o'clock, everybody's gone. It's like a ghost town out there. But, or you fly in the evenings, and then the storms, because it's monsoon season, and the storms, we had a really big windstorm the other day. But yeah, for me, that's, I was able to self-assess and I got a lot out of the article. So I really apologize to you though, Jay. I should have sent it to you. I was looking for it again, and I'll have to go back and pull it off the website, but I'll send it to you, and you can kind of read it.
Cause you know what, Mike, the biggest thing about what you're talking about, and it's kind of making me smile because, as you know, my military career, I did a lot of safety stuff, and the biggest thing that bites people in the butt is complacency, for one part. And one of the things that military people hated was we'd always get a safety brief, right? We've done this 1,000 times, but we'd still get a 2-minute, 3-minute safety brief. And everybody would groan, oh, I got to listen to this guy, or I'm the guy who's having to give the brief. But now that I'm thinking about it, you just went over those couple of points about things. It's not like they were earth-shattering or, wow, I never thought to do that. It's the thing to get your frame of mind into that right place, right? To make you think about what you're doing, right? And not to become complacent. Because if you're complacent, it was working great the last time I flew. The last time I flew, it was working great. So it should work great now, right?
Right.
Yeah, wrong. That's just not the way things work. So it's nice to know that, you get your little brief or you're going over a little checklist. It's just bringing those things to the forefront of your mind about things. Because even the last couple of times flying with Jim with like the Franken-10, when we had a few of our mishaps, one was not checking the linkage, right? Because, he said, I checked it before. Oh, okay, that's good. Okay, I'll go fly it. Oh, it's not where, I crisscrossed put the servos in the wrong place and everything's reversed. It's just stupid things like that 30 seconds of a check would have, the double check. It wasn't going to take any time. But like you said, since we're not, we're so much into this hobby and we're so used to doing things that we just take it for granted. Oh, yeah, of course we know what we're doing. We've been doing it for 20 years, 25 years. But yet we still
why wouldn't I know?
But yet we still have these stories of, I went to go do blah, blah, blah. And it's just funny, you were just talking about the Infinity Wing, and I was just asking you some basic questions like, oh, well, why did you do that? Why did you went outside of your normal thing, asking somebody to help you with a new plane that you only flown twice, and you still, you're still figuring out. So why did you, launch it yourself? Because it's still kind of tricky, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh, well, nobody came to help me, and I was in a hurry, and I went outside the normal, what I normally do, what you normally do. Right. So yeah, I think it's great that, your range safety guy putting out newsletters, just telling people to do those simple checklists. And I say to our users, you should probably make a couple of checklists to keep your butt out of trouble and, form some good habits. Right. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's not going to take up any more time, and you're going to have a lot more planes that survive and equipment that's not getting broken over something stupid. So, yeah, it's definitely
well.
Worth it.
And I reading a couple of the ones that, when I first read it, I was kind of like, why would you do that, right? Why would you pre-flight at the house and then pre-flight at the field? And as I was thinking about it, once again, if I point back to the Yak 55. I you can see the table behind me. I usually put the airplane all together, get it all fixed up, test everything. Okay, it's ready to go when I get to the field, right? And so in a particular case, the Yak 55, I threw it in the truck and I had pre-flighted it. The airplane flew great here. I put it all together, got all the way to the field. Just because it was bouncing around in the back seat, the prop saver band busted.
Right.
So when I got to the field, I walked out. I wasn't even paying attention, but I just picked it up, walked to the field, did everything. And then when I looked down, I'm like, where's the prop? Well, it was still in the car.
Right.
Or in the truck. And so when I went back, the band was broke. Well, guess what I didn't bring to the field?
Right.
More
another
bands.
Band.
So my whole day was shot.
Yeah.
But the point is that just because I pre-flighted it at the house doesn't mean that the rattling around in the car didn't bust something loose or, I hit a really big bump and it dropped a, keeper off or something happened, right? Because it does get tossed around, and we know that happens in the air too. I've done, triple, Lindy flips and whatever, and crashed an airplane because the ESC let loose and one of the wires came out. So I do know that happens, and even though as good as we are, we can have it test flown, or we can have it put together.
So you just remind me of
when we get to
another little story. So when AK Mike was down here, last month, and we were down here flying and stuff, I brought a plane in, and I think my wing, and I broke the prop. And so once again, we were talking, doing whatever. I grabbed another spare prop. I threw it on there. I got busy doing some other stuff. Mike was helping Jim, or they were doing something, and I was kind of, finishing, putting on the prop, not paying attention, kind of watching what they were doing. Went out to, grab my stuff, grab my wing, chucked it. And the minute, I went up to 3/4 power and threw it, I went, oh, that ain't right. But everything was leaving my hands after I chucked it, right? So it was chucked, right. Kabam, and I luckily brought it down and didn't crash it too bad. And I go, that didn't sound right. And, and so those two guys turned around, they were like, what was that? And I go, yeah, I already know what I did. And they're like, what are you talking about? What? Why did you bad throw? And I go, no, I put the prop on backwards. That's why it didn't sound right. It was, I wasn't paying attention.
Right.
Put the prop on backwards. And luckily, once again, it wasn't, it was a durable plane, so I didn't have too much of a problem.
Sure. Well, yeah, so that could have been devastating if it was any other ones. But I've done that where I had a counter-rotating prop, and I put it on, same problem. Thing had no power, wasn't getting up, and I'm thinking, what the heck is wrong with this thing? Well, it's because I ordered a pair of them, right? And the pair came with one counter. It was for a quad, so they sell them in one going one way and one going the other way. And I just grabbed the other one when that prop broke, and I didn't even think about it until somebody pointed out and said, their props turn the other directions. Well, it sounds like somebody wants some attention, but our time is up for this week. Join us on our next episode. We've got a little story about Jim. I think he was diving into fixing motors. So we're going to talk a little bit about that on our next episode. But thanks for joining us this week on the Park Flyer Podcast. As always, hit that like and subscribe. We appreciate your jumping on the YouTube channel and getting us up and running. And, mark us on your favorite podcast feature. And we'll talk to you in 2 weeks. From Arizona, I'm Michael.
And from the hills of Texas, I'm Jay.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.
You have been listening to the Park Flyer Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your next visit. Please give our show a star rating and review, and feel free to email us your questions, topics, or suggestions to parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com.